I love when people share something with me that I did not know
Yeah.
concerning the Word of God. And I really love it when it inspires me to read into it more.
Yeah.
You know, there's a difference in, oh yeah, that's a cool thing to know. And wow, I wonder if that has implications here, or if that's why this happened. Oh, this makes sense. That's when it starts really getting awesome.
Yeah.
In your learning. Okay, so I saved a scripture on my phone that I do not have with me, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm stalling while this pulls up my scripture. Because it was one that came up the last minute here in my mind. As I was praying, Lord, if there's anything that I've missed in my notes that you want me to say. And I probably should have asked that. I should have prayed that a little bit earlier when I was praying, because when he answers me, it's like, you know, church just started. So next time I'll give him a little bit more time on that. So we're in Leviticus, and we've gone through the offerings, the sacrifices. Anybody remember the word that I've used over the last 4 or 5 weeks for sacrifice or offering in the Old Testament? Korban. Korban is an invitation to relationship. It is not a negative thing. It is not a time of loss, but it's an opportunity to give in order to draw closer to.
Right.
And that makes a big difference when you're looking at the difference between a pagan nation and the children of Israel. They're not being punished, and so they have to give a burnt offering. They give the opportunity, or they have the opportunity to give in the burnt offering. The meal offering is the same thing. We talk about all that I have is yours, Lord. There are times when we give above and beyond what is technically required of us, and we give an extra blessing to the church. And I have never in my entire life seen somebody give a sacrifice of something financial or material, tangible, where God has not blessed it.
Yeah.
I've never seen that. I've never seen somebody say, you know what, instead of going out to eat tonight, it's going to cost me $30 to go out to eat and feed my family. I'm going to give that $30 in the offering, and we're going to go home and eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That's a sacrifice. Yeah. But I've never seen that happen where God didn't bless.
Yeah, that's right.
Always. Always. So the meal offering is all that I have is the Lord's. The peace offering is just because you're God. Just because you're awesome, and because everything is wailing up inside of me, and I'm so excited just to be your child. I'm going to give an extra sacrifice just because you're God, and I'm thankful. We talked last week about the sin offering. Now, I kind of took the sin offering and condensed a good portion of it down to just the priesthood, because that affects everything else. Okay? Mom used to say, what you do in moderation, your children will do in excess. It's kind of the same when it comes to the church and the way that God has set up the leadership. Whenever a pastor kind of goes off and does his thing, the churches go off and do their thing, and then we can't figure out what's wrong. We can't really blame the saints if they're being led the wrong way, if they're not reading the Bible and they don't pay attention. So you have to, that's why there's a higher responsibility when it comes to ministry. And that's not just in the priesthood either. That's also with the saints. Because you are a leader. I am a leader.
Yeah.
There are people watching you. There are people who are depending on you to do what is right, because they're watching you as an example.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not exactly easy, but it's true. So last week we talked about the sin offering, and we talked about if somebody does commit a sin. A sin is not, this particular type of sin offering was not something where somebody intentionally did something wrong. Okay? Remember I said something about how one of those legalistic terms, or one of those, it's not legalistic, what is the word? One of those shifty terms is that it's easier to get forgiveness than it is permission. It's easier to do it and then say, oh, I'm so sorry I did that. But God's grace and mercy saw me through. There's such a thing as perverted grace. That's not what grace is. Grace is not, I can go do whatever I want and then God's going to cover me with his love and mercy.
Yeah.
That's not how that works. Repentance is not repentance unless you have a repentant heart.
Yeah.
Let me say that again. Repentance is not repentance unless you have a repentant heart. So if I do something and then I say the magical words of, Lord, please forgive me, there's nothing magical in those words.
Yeah.
If my heart is not broken and contrite, I'm just repeating magic words.
Yeah.
And there is no magic words. So, with that being said, an unintentional sin is what that particular offering was for. I love technology until it doesn't work. All of a sudden, I can't get on the Wi-Fi unless I select another Wi-Fi and then get a subcategory into a Wi-Fi so I can pull up my Bible verse. Yes, there it is. Okay. All right. Now, somebody explain to me what guilt means. What is guilt?
Well, sometimes it's because you got caught doing something.
Okay. Busted.
Busted.
Okay, so is that an emotion or is that a thing that is? Like, is guilt something you feel, or is guilt an actual thing that can be acquired?
Both. I think it's both.
Okay. So there's a difference between the feeling of guilt and the legal sense of guilt.
Yeah.
Anybody here ever felt guilty? Anybody ever done something and then at first you're like, well, I was right in doing that? Maybe. Most likely. I mean, it seemed, yeah. Like, well, yeah. I mean, I was right. Right? Maybe I was right. And the more you question it, the bad, worse you feel, and then you start feeling like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That's guilt. That's when you know you did something wrong, or you're pretty sure you did something wrong. The connection between all of us is that we're all guilty of sin.
Mm-hmm.
All have sinned and come short. Everybody. Everybody. Is that for all of sin and come short of the what?
Glory of God.
Glory of God.
Okay, so the glory is the manifestation of his power. It is his spirit.
Mm-hmm.
If we've all sinned, notice the word picture there. Okay? The word picture is, this is the mark of holiness, or the representation of the glory of God. And we're throwing something, we're trying to make it, but it falls short. Look at the word picture of that. You're trying to hit that mark, but you fall short. That's what sin is. That's what the word sin means in the Old Testament. It does not mean I'm running the opposite direction of the glory of God. That sin means I was trying and I came up short. Does that make sense? You see the connection in that wording? Where we've all fallen short of the glory of God. So the sin offering was for unintentional sin. It was for you were trying, but you just didn't make it. Okay? Your spirit's willing, but your body is weak. Your mind's weak.
In, I think it's Isaiah, when it talks about the sacrifice on the cross, and it describes all of the reasons why Jesus was crucified. One of the things says it was, he was bruised for our iniquity,
Chastisement of our sin was upon him.
and there's a difference between iniquity and transgression. And I always get the two confused. I was just curious if you could.
Well, we're actually going to go.
Intentional and one of them's accidental, but I can never.
So we're going to actually correlate not those exact words, but the same concept in just a second.
Okay.
So it's in that same deal. So sin is for unintentional sins. This is basically the thou shalt nots. Okay, that's what the sin offering was for. And I'm kind of rehashing this for a reason, because I don't want the sin and the guilt offering to overlap. Okay, they're different. The sin was unintentional sin, but there were always 4 steps. Now, I covered the priesthood last week, but for everybody, there were 4 steps to offering a sin offering, okay, which was mandatory, which means everybody offered a sin offering. They were required because we're all human. They were all human. There's 4 steps. The first step was confession. Confession. You cannot repent of a sin that you don't think you did.
That's right.
Yep, that's right.
That's true.
We are good at excusing and justifying and legalism and making sure that it sounds real good. Well, in another world, another time, I would have been correct in this, and if they had have done what they were supposed to, I would have never done this, but I guess it was wrong, so Lord forgive me.
Mhm.
Do you know how many negotiations I've heard with God in the altar? I'm like, just admit you were wrong and move on with life. My goodness.
Well, God knows it regardless.
For real.
You can't
Like,
blame him.
Brother Cornwell is incredible. He pastors and he would say, suck it up, Buttercup, move on. Just suck it up. There are times when you've got to just admit you're wrong.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what caused it, doesn't matter what led up to it, doesn't matter who was there, who let you do it, who talked you into doing it, doesn't matter, you were wrong, period. Point blank.
Right.
Confession was always required. We like to think that just because only one person really was privy to what was going on when somebody brought in a sin offering, unless it was the priest and he had to take his bull outside the camp, but other people brought their sacrifice in, and it wasn't a big announcement. It was him and this priest, but he still had to go to the priest and say, I've messed up. This is my sin. I shouldn't have done this. Okay? Now, we see that kind of contorted in different religions. We have one religion where you have to go to a priest and tell them everything that you've done wrong. The Bible doesn't have any precedent on that. There's no biblical whatever for that. The confession was, that's got to be confessed. You have to admit you've done it, and confession's got to make it to God. In the Old Testament, the priest was the mediator because the people had separated themselves from the presence of God. But when Jesus came, he's the only mediator there is. He's the only person. He was the only God. He is the only God that you have to actually confess to unless you've wronged somebody. And we'll get to that in a minute. Confession was always required. A broken and a contrite heart is required. You can't be justifying what you did and offering a sacrifice of repentance. Presentation of a substitute offering was always required. In other words, something had to pay the debt for what you did. We all sinned. Something's got to pay the penalty. Okay? So that's where the ram or the whatever would come in. Whatever. Forgiveness was pronounced from the offering being accepted. And then there was a cleansing from defilement. Remember, from past the altar, you had like the laver of water or whatever. A lot of times they would have, it was called a mitzvah. It was like it was a ritual bath. So once you had asked for forgiveness, you had offered the sacrifice, and you would go through a ritual cleansing in order to be cleansed from the defilement, the physical representation of the internal sin. All right? But let's cross-reference that for a second. In John 1 and 9, this is after Jesus has come. He's died on the cross for everybody's sin. He's been bruised for our iniquities, and chastisement of our sins are on him, and all this kind of stuff. He became our substitute sacrifice. Okay? After that, John wrote this. If we confess our sins, that's step 1, he's faithful and just to forgive our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Do you see the 3 steps? That means that the sin offering was just a picture. It was a shadow of what was going to happen when Jesus came and died on the cross.
Right.
We don't offer a ram anymore, but look at what has been done for us in that same pattern that was required of everyone who had sinned. That means that Jesus died on the cross for us because we sinned, just like they had to offer that sin offering. That would preach, and there's a whole lot in it, but I'm not going to go into that. Okay. So the key concept that separates the sin offering from the guilt offering is one thing, and it's the aspect of restitution. That's a big old word. If you have a lisp, don't try it. But restitution is basically something has got to be paid for it. Okay, something pays back for the wrong that has been done. Does that make sense? So we're going to look at Leviticus chapter 5. If you are following along in the King James Version Bible, I can't give you verses because this actually starts in verse 14. In the Jewish Bible, it ends at like verse 23. of chapter 5. But in the King James Version, there is no verse 23 of chapter 5. It's like verse 3 or 4 of chapter 6. That's why I don't have verse numbers on here, is because it doesn't line up. The reason for that is I'm going to show you in just a second. There are a couple of words that when we read them in the King James Version Bible, we can lump them all together, but they're not. Okay, so I'm going to show you that in just a second. All right, so let's go ahead and start with, I think it really is verse 14 in the King James Version, but you can cross-reference this. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, If any man commit a trespass in the holy things of the Lord, then he shall bring his forfeit unto the Lord. So let's look at that verse just for a second. In the King James Version Bible, forfeit is actually trespass. Right? Does that make sense? So if you have a trespass, if you commit a trespass, then you need to bring your trespass to the Lord. Anybody want to elaborate on that? So if I have a smart aleck teenager that's getting on my nerves, I need to bring that smart aleck teenager to the Lord and sacrifice it. I mean, it sounds legit, right? Makes sense to me. But that's not what it's saying. So forfeit is actually a better word for that. So let's look at this just for a second. The Hebrew word for trespass is, there's actually more than one. And the first trespass that's right there, if anyone commit a trespass, this is the word for a falsehood or a treacherous act, something that was unfaithful. That's what a trespass was. Now remember, a sin is something unintentional. You know you broke the law, but you didn't mean to. You weren't trying to. You just slipped up. Okay? But this is more like shiftiness. This is something where you said something wrong about somebody, or you cheated somebody out of something, or you were heavy-handed with the poor, or you were whatever. This is something where you were just nasty, like when it comes to something that was unfair. Does that make sense? But the later part of it, where it says forfeit here, this is actually, this is a sham, is how you'd say it, and it actually means for the trespass offering. So your forfeit is whatever you're sacrificing, which it tells us later it's got to be a ram. So the word forfeit actually means that ram sacrifice, that offering. So if you read in King James Version, it looks like the same word, and that's why we're using this one. All right, so it has got to be, go ahead and let's do the next verse there. It's got to be a ram without blemish out of the flock, according to thy valuation in silver by shekels, after the shekel of the sanctuary, for a guilt offering. Now, if you'll notice, up until this point, we really haven't talked about money a whole lot, because we're still in a barter system. Like, you know, if a man had a lot of goats, he was well off. He was a wealthy man. But now we see that there are shekels that are the sanctuary shekel. And I'll go into this later. It's a really awesome study because it makes sense later on. But there was the standard, what is it that they call that with the Fort Knox and all that, and it's the something standard, the gold something standard. What is that called? It's like the standard of finances. It bases how much the euro is worth and how much the dollar is worth and all that kind of stuff. Everything's based on that type of calculation. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Gold standard, is that what it's called? Okay, so that sets the value on all other currencies. Okay? In the Old Testament, the gold standard was the sanctuary shekel. Everything was based around that particular value of that thing. So if you wanted to bring a ram in, it had to be a good ram that was worth money. It was valuable. It was without blemish. Not just because it didn't have any physical blemishes, but because it was worth a lot of money. It needed to be something that was good. Okay, so from the sanctuary shekel, blah, 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 blah. And he shall make restitution for that which he hath done amiss in the holy thing, and he shall add the 5th part thereto, and give it to the priest, and the priest shall make atonement for him with a ram of the guilt offering, and he shall be forgiven. restitution. Did I wander? Okay. All right, restitution. So, let me give an example here. I have a hole in the fence around my property. And that hole is just big enough for a big old fat sheep to wiggle its way through. And I know that a sheep could wiggle through that hole, but I don't fix it because I keep all of my sheep up close to my tent. But I also know that Ashton's got a couple of really dumb sheep that like to go wander, okay? And I also know that they love to squeeze through holes in fences. I'm not worried about it because my sheep are up close to my fence, but hers are dumb. And so I just don't do anything about that hole. And then one day I'm counting my sheep, and where I did have 20 sheep, I now have 23 sheep. And 3 of them are dumb. Huh, isn't that amazing how God has multiplied my sheep by 3 dumb sheep? Wow. Well, Ashton's wandering around counting hers, and she's missing 3 dumb sheep. Isn't that a coincidence? All right, moving on. So I start thinking about the fact that I now have 3 extra sheep. And not only do I have 3 dumb sheep, I also have a whole little flock of baby dumb sheep that are starting to be cultivated from the others that have come into my flock. Now she still is wondering where her 3 dumb sheep have gone. But I don't say anything. And then finally, I let the conviction get to me. I'm like, you know what? She really could use those 3 dumb sheep back. I probably should go to her and fix that. So, I think about it for a little bit, and I'm like, you know what? I kind of feel bad about that. There's not really a direct law that says that if 3 dumb sheep come into your pen that you have to, you know, I guess I did know they belonged to her, or I assumed. I'm pretty sure that they belong to her. I probably ought to go and do a guilt offering because just in case, you know, I probably need to do that. This is where the guilt would come in. So I would take my ram to the priest, and he would inspect it, make sure everything is good. That ram would be sacrificed, and the meat would go to the priest. But I have to do something else too. I have to gather up the 3 dumb sheep, and, okay, y'all stay with me here, we're going to do some math. If my ram is worth $10, okay, then I have to take 1/5 of that price, add it to my sin offering or my guilt offering, and give that to the person that I have wronged. So I have to return her 3 sheep, tell her I was wrong and I was being shifty, and I've got to add value to it in order to let her know that I was wrong and I want to benefit this in case she lost any money in the time or whatever. Another way of looking at that is if there's a lawsuit and money has been lost or, you know, for instance, if somebody had a house that was covered by termite policy, hypothetically, and say that house at one time had termites and it did a lot of damage, and then the termite company would not hold or would not be responsible and they wouldn't fix any of the damages. And so the new owners have to pay for thousands of dollars worth of damages to be fixed. They have trouble selling the house because now it has a bad reputation and all that kind of stuff. If that termite company hypothetically were sued and the family won, there is something called punitive damages that would be paid. So it's
Punitive damages.
what?
Hypothetical punitive damages.
Yes, in this hypothetical case, it would be hypothetical damages. So the punitive damage is not to repay for anything that that person paid out. The point of it is to deter the termite company from ever lying through their teeth again. Okay? It's more about trying to curb negative behavior from the assailant than it is to make sure that this person has money. Does that make sense?
Right.
So this is the same kind of concept on when a child backtalks you and you pop them on the rear that's not so you feel better about life. Okay? Although it does feel a lot better when a kid, but that's beside the point. The point is that kid is going to associate my rear end hurts when I smart off to mom. I need to not do that again. Okay? That negative response curbs that attitude. It
Yeah.
curbs the process. Does that make sense? Okay, so the fifth part that goes back is to help the relationship, but it's also to put it in the mind, hey, it's really expensive and math is hard. And so if I'm holy, then I don't have to do this math. And I don't have to give an extra fifth back to this person. And it's very humbling to go to somebody and say, I was wrong. So they don't get away with just bringing their problem to the altar. They also have to fix the relationship.
Yep. That's right.
The altar here is for forgiveness of sins. It's for a time when you can bring anything to God. But there's also a concept that says if you have a problem with a brother, lay your offering down, go deal with him,
Yeah.
and bring it back. All right, do we have another verse? And if anyone sin and do any of the things which the Lord hath commanded not to be done, though he know it not, yet he is guilty and shall bear his iniquity. Is that it? Okay. And he shall bring a ram without blemish out of the flock, according to the valuation for the guilt offering unto the priest, and the priest shall make atonement for him concerning the error which he hath committed, though he knew it not, and he shall be forgiven. It is a guilt offering. He is certainly guilty before the Lord, even though he didn't know it. He didn't know it. So let's hold that just for a second. There are things that we will do while we're maturing in Christ that we may not realize is causing damage. Okay? There are a lot of sincere things that are done that are sincerely wrong. And there are a lot of good intentions that are dreadfully wrong. Let me give you an example. A long time ago, there was a lady that had come into the church that was a new convert, and she was from a different denomination, and she was learning. She'd been filled with the Holy Ghost. Precious little lady. And she and her husband, they were like 110 years old, and they were just the cutest little couple ever. And she made a statement one night after church when we're all hanging around. She's like, I just love matching my husband. She said, so, I bought him this little Hawaiian shirt at the store, and I went and bought one for me too. And so we'd match. And it was just the cutest little thing. You just want to pinch their cheeks. They were adorable. And one very well-intentioned lady that didn't have the wisdom God gave a Q-tip told her that, she said, sister, don't you know that that's wearing stuff that pertains to a man? We don't buy stuff in the men's department. Bless God. God was not blessed. It was so lacking in wisdom. She was so well-intentioned. She really thought that she was benefiting this woman by telling her this little tidbit of information that she quite didn't understand herself. And she was well-intentioned. What she didn't know is that she was crushing that woman's spirit. And she was stepping out of place. Now, I do not think that she was being malicious in the least bit. But the maturity wasn't there yet. And so she was speaking before the maturity called on. Now, if it ever came to a point, or if Pastor helped it come to the point, where she realized the damage that she had done in saying this, just blah, 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 all out on this other lady, her response should be to go back to that lady and say, you know what, I kind of spoke out of turn. I'm so sorry. That really wasn't my place to say that, and, I probably need to read into that a little bit more myself, make sure I understand it before I share that kind of information with somebody again. There are some things that in maturity you will look back and see things you said or you did or you were a part of that should not have happened. Those are things that as they come to you, then you need to fix them if you can. Okay? If you can reconcile it. So this particular part of the sin is if they were unsure, but they started feeling guilty about it, or they thought there might have been something wrong. This is very similar to, Lord, search my heart. If there's anything that's not like you, I'm not talking about the stuff I know is not like him. This is stuff that might have crept in. This is something where you are listening to a sermon and something that you never really thought of before starts to convict. And you think, oh, does that apply to me? Is that something that I'm doing? Is that something I didn't realize I was doing? If you can come out of a sermon completely and totally unchanged and unconvicted and nothing really hit home with you, there's a problem. Because God's word will not return void.
Right.
If there is an open heart at all, there is something that will happen in the word of God that is being presented that will touch your heart. Cricket. So search my heart, that's one of those terms that shows you, Lord, if there's something that I should be dealing with. Lord, I want to grow up. I do not want to be the same as I've always been.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus.
Lord, help me. I have access to a group of pastors' wives, and sometimes I see these older pastors' wives that are so wise. Like somebody will say something like, I just don't know how to deal with this and this and this. And they're precious. Some of them are like, well, baby, just chill and just hang on, and it's probably not something you're going to need to deal with. That's right. This isn't new. That didn't shot God off the throne. We've all been there. It's okay. And it'll work out. It'll work out. And then I see some pastors' wives who haven't been around as long as others, and I think, hush, stop talking. Stop now while you're ahead. You're not ahead anymore. Stop. And I think, oh, Lord, I wish somebody had hushed me. And then I go back and I think of all these precious pastors' wives who were so patient with me while I just spit out all of my ignorance like I knew something. It's all part of maturing and growing up. We've all said ignorant things. Yes, we have. Amen. Hallelujah. Yes, we have. It all comes out.
Yeah.
Part of it is maturity, but as you go and as God convicts you, first of all, you know to change. Don't stay the same.
That's right.
Okay. Boy, y'all quiet tonight. Either I'm getting on some toes or you're all asleep or somebody ate something nice and warm and whatever and you're falling asleep. I don't know. Something. Y'all with me? Are you
Yes.
awake?
Yeah.
I'm getting that whole... His eyes are rolling back in heads. Okay. All right. If I do something that damages someone and I did not realize that it had damaged them, but I learn about it later, I need to make an amends for it. So we're going to talk about that in practicality for a second. If you are going to make an amends with somebody, if you are going to fix something where you have wronged somebody in the past, it is vitally important that you do it wisely.
Yeah. That's right.
Do it wisely. You do not want to reopen an old wound. Okay? You don't. Let me give you an example of this, and I'm full of horrible examples, so I'm going to give another one. My personality is not always easy to handle, and yeah, I'm working on that. God's alive in my life. But I'm 30-something years old. Imagine when I was 12.
I can imagine.
Mom can imagine what I was like at 12. I was a lot to handle, okay? And part of that's because my mind was always somewhere. And sometimes my mouth would engage before my brain would. And so that still happens, but it's getting better. And having that type A personality, sometimes, and type A is like you kick in gear, you get it done. If nobody's in charge, then you fix it and go on because somebody needs to be in charge and let's do this, okay? Let's just do it. And that can be a wonderful blessing. It can also create dictators, but, we're not going to talk about that. So anyway, because of that, type A personalities don't always click with type A personalities.
Right.
That's why you normally have one outgoing, just, blah, let's do everything kind of person in a group, and the rest of them are either like, okay, yeah, let's do that, or I don't know about that, or yeah, y'all go do that. You have different personality types in a group. So type A personalities don't always click. And you have to learn how to manage that. So I was about 12 years old, and my pastor had preached this incredible sermon with the same concept as this. If you have fault with somebody, fix that. Because if you are not forgiving other people and you're not asking for forgiveness, if you've got a problem with somebody, then God's not going to hear your prayers. It was a heart-wrenching sermon. We were like, oh, everybody's praying, blah, 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 and I'm forgiving people I don't even know just in case, and I don't know, just whatever. And an acquaintance I thought was a good friend came up to me and she said, I'm so sorry, I've hated you for so long. I was like, you have? She said, you just get on my nerves. I just want you to know that I've just hated you for so long. And the longer she talked, the deeper that knife went into my stomach. I was like, okay, for how long? All those times that we talked and you were just sitting there hating me? Okay. Well, I guess I forgive you for something and I didn't know you hated me so much. I left broken hearted.
Yeah.
She felt great. It was completely and totally off of her shoulders. Whew, it's a new day. It about killed me. Imagine being a 12-year-old girl and just learning that somebody you thought was a friend detested your very being. If you are going to make amends with somebody, don't create a difficulty. Okay? There are things that you think about somebody that they may not know you think them. Don't go tell them that you thought them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That sounds like common sense, but you'd be surprised. Common sense is not as common as it used to be. There are times when you may have had a serious issue with somebody in your mind, but God helped you and you've been able to keep your mouth shut.
Mhm.
Yep.
That doesn't mean those thoughts aren't there. You need to ask God to forgive you for your thoughts. And if you have done anything to slander that person, you need to ask for forgiveness. But if they don't know you have slandered them, don't go tell them that you slandered them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We've got to have wisdom there.
Yeah.
Because you may inadvertently cause damage that wasn't there to start with.
Yeah. That's
Does
right.
that make sense?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
good.
All right. Do it wisely. Like I said, the whole purpose of this is to make you accountable. Nobody likes to say I messed up. Nobody likes to say, hey, I was a jerk. Whatever. Sometimes clearing our conscience can cause irreparable damage with somebody else. That's what deathbed confessions. Or, you have somebody that you don't think is going to make it, and you sit down beside them and tell them this whole world of things that you've done wrong and how you've mistreated them. That person goes into the afterlife thinking, well, my whole life was a lie. This person hated me the whole time, or whatever.
Well, they get better and have to live with it.
Yeah, and then when they make it off the deathbed. Yep. So as to keep us also accountable with financial integrity.
Yep.
So if I've cheated Ashton out of 3 dumb sheep, and then I have to give her dumb sheep back plus one of mine,
That was a dumb move.
that was dumb. Dave Ramsey calls that stupid tax. It's got a biblical concept. So basically, don't lie. Don't steal. If you do, make it up on a 5th. So don't lie and don't steal. It's easier than doing the math. So what did the guilt offering cover? Did I skipped a few verses?
Unintentional.
Still got a good couple.
I still got a couple of chapters.
Yeah, you got
Okay, let's keep going. All right.
You got 6 left.
All right, let's go through those really quick. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, if anyone sin and commit a trespass. Oh, I didn't even go through trespass, did I? And that was the whole point. If anyone commit a trespass, yeah, I did, okay, against the Lord, and deal falsely with his neighbor in a matter of deposit or a pledge or of robbery, or have oppressed his neighbor, or have found that which was lost, like a dumb sheep, and deal falsely therein, and swear to a lie, in any of all those that the man doeth, sinning thereof or therein, then it shall be, if he hath sinned and he is guilty, that he shall restore that which is that he took by robbery. So I'm giving the dumb sheep back. And the thing which he hath gotten by oppression, that's something that I guilted somebody in, or I knew somebody didn't have something, but I was still